Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I am going to talk about the different itineraries through the Disney Cruise Line and if you should be picking a cruise based on the ship or the itinerary. So starting out with just that last question, should you pick a trip based on the ship or the itinerary? Personally, I mean, this obviously is going to vary. Everybody's going to have their own personal preference. I think you should definitely consider both. Disney Cruise Line is more expensive. There's no doubt about that. They have ways that they make it worth it, though, in terms of services and benefits of their ships and things like that. So, yes, I do think the ship is important. However, you probably aren't going to stay on the ship the entire time. You're probably going to get off in some of the ports. Now, like I mentioned in a previous video, this past summer, my husband and I went on a Northern European cruise, and we started in Barcelona, Spain, went to several ports in Spain, one in Portugal, and then we ended in Dover, England. Now, when I was deciding whether or not I wanted to do this cruise, a couple of things came to mind. One, it was a Disney Cruise Line, and that for me, that's really what was the most important in terms of ships. I just wanted to do a Disney cruise. I didn't care specifically which ship, but it was an added bonus that it was the Disney Magic that I had not personally been on at that point. Now, in terms of itineraries, now my husband and I, we love to travel. We travel quite a bit, and we more or less want to go everywhere, except North Korea and Russia. Things aren't really not good in Russia right now. Anyway, so we want to go everywhere. Of course, we prioritize, though, what places do you want to go more than others. So do we want to go to Spain and Portugal? Of course, because we want to go everywhere. Those are not places we would have put on our list, like at the top of the list. So for us, that was the perfect cruise. We'll get to see different parts of Spain and Portugal, which, like I said, we want to do. Not super badly, but we do want to do it. And we want to go on a Disney cruise. So it's kind of scratching two itches at once, I guess you could say. So in terms of what do we consider, are we going to pick the Disney Magic or based on the Disney Magic, or are we going to pick based on the cruise itinerary? Now, the Magic spent the whole summer in Europe and they did various cruises. It was not just Northern European cruises. They do, I think they did like a Greek Isles, and I don't know if they did a British Isles cruise this year, but there is a British Isles cruise some summers, and a Norwegian fjord. I mean, there's tons of cruises. So in terms of deciding which itinerary we wanted to pick, of course, cost is going to be a factor. Cost for flights. Is it going to be more or less to fly out of a specific port now, or port city? Now, in doing this cruise, like I said, we started in Barcelona and ended in Dover, England. The majority of cruises start and end in the same city. Not all, obviously, because we just did one. This was nice because we got to do things in Spain and Portugal and England. So that was our appeal. Dover, England is just like 2 hours from London, and that's like one of our favorite places on the planet. So we got to go to London. So that was a big draw for us. Now, typically plane tickets do cost more if you are flying out of a different city from where you flew in. So you do have a cost offset by doing that. Now, in terms of the city you are starting in, I always recommend going the day before. Do not plan to fly in the day the cruise leaves. So we flew into Barcelona, Spain the day before. And because of that, I looked up a few things to do in Barcelona, Spain. We're going to be there for a little bit more than a full day. There were things that we wanted to do and see, and I wanted to make the best of it. So we did that, and that was perfect. Now, in terms of the rest of the cruise, we really didn't do a lot of planning. We signed up quite late, so by the time we signed up, the port adventures were pretty much all full, and I didn't care because it's not like I have had my heart set on going to Cartagena, Spain, or Bilbao, Spain, and like I have these things that I want or need to do. So we just kind of looked up the really broad, what is this city about? And then we walked around the city, like just kind of discovering and seeing things. And then when we got tired, we went back on the ship. So for the most part, we spent the morning and maybe like the very beginning part of the afternoon in port. And then the rest of the time we went on the ship. Now, in terms of the ports, something to keep an eye on. If you've never cruised before, you may not know this. Some ports, and it seems this is very common in Europe, but I suppose it could be anywhere. Some ports Your ship docks, you get off the ship, and you're right in the city. And that was the case in some of our locations. Like, I think Cartagena, it was like that in Cartagena. However, that is not the case everywhere. In Porto, Portugal, in Bilbao, I know this is the case in many, many European cities. The cruise ship docks, and you need to take a shuttle or an Uber, something. You need to take transportation to the city, in which case that needs to be factored as well. Like when we went to, I think Porto was like a 40-minute drive from, so we got off the ship. Disney had arranged for buses to keep coming every so many minutes, like a half hour or so. A bus would arrive and would pick up people, and there would be a central drop-off location in the city, and then it would come every 30 minutes to that location. You could get on and it would take you right back to port. So that is something to keep in mind as well when you're planning out your itinerary. Like I said, this worked out perfectly for us because we had really no expectations. We were totally open and wanting to see Spain at some point in our lives, but we did not have any expectations. And because of that, it was a very relaxed trip. There were very few things that were like, I need to make sure I do this. But we were also blown away. Spain and Portugal are gorgeous. You guys, like Europe is gorgeous in general, right? But we were so blown away by how pretty everything was, and the people were so nice. For example, on our Uber drive from the airport to our hotel for the one night we were in Barcelona, our driver, he noticed our Spanish is more than 20 years old. It's for some of us, it's about 20 years old. 17. Like we took high school Spanish a little bit in college, and that's about it. So turns out it was not sufficient to communicate. He spoke English. He had no problem speaking English to us. And he was talking to us in English when we were paying him for the ride. We were like going to give him a tip. And he pointed out that tipping is not customary in Spain, which like who would do, like who would do that? I think most people would be like, oh my God, I'm going to keep my mouth shut because, these people are giving me a tip that they don't have to give me and they don't know, but they're used to seeing Americans. They know it is in our culture. That being said, we had a whole conversation with him and we did tip him and we made sure that he like wasn't offended by it or anything. And he was like, oh my gosh, you're so generous. It was like €5 or something. And it was a decent car ride. So it was not a lot by American standards by any stretch of the imagination, but so kind, just so kind. We saw all kinds of cool things. So I met so many cool people. So I will do another video talking about our specific cruise in the ports we went to and just kind of share that more laid back vlog style as opposed to this really formal style on my t-shirt. But that was kind of my mindset in terms of ship and locations. We kind of did both. We did get off the ship at the various ports, but we spent a significant amount of time on the ship. We did not spend the entire day off the ship at the ports. If you are going to spend, if the cruise you're looking at is in port every single day, and you are going to be off the ship at every port, and your attitude is, I'm just going to sleep there, a Disney cruise probably is not for you then, because they are more expensive because of their various services and your other guest experiences. And if you're not going to take advantage of those, that doesn't really make sense. However, if you're only going to be on the ship and you're not going to see any of the itineraries, it's up to you. It might not make sense to or for you. When I went to the Bahamas, we got off in Castaway Cay because it's Disney's private island. It's gorgeous. It's fantastic. We wanted to experience that. We'd been to Nassau before though, so we did not feel the need to get off in Nassau. We stayed on the ship, and that was great because most of the people are at port. So it kind of feels like you have the ship to yourself. So that is the day. We hung out a little bit more by the pool and did the aqueduct and things like that. So take a little bit of each into account. It's totally up to you. If you have the money and you just want to use a Disney ship to sleep, that's completely up to you and it's not a problem. But for people who are like, hey, I'm willing to spend the money on a cruise as long as it's worth it. I just want to make sure it's worth it, but then I'm willing to spend the money. And that is definitely where my husband and I lie. And for that reason, this was absolutely the perfect trip and the perfect cruise itinerary. Spent the mornings in port, spent the afternoons and evening on the ship. In the afternoons, there was almost no one on the ship. It was absolutely wonderful. One other thing I wanted to mention about that in terms of cost. Now, if you are in port, like I said, you can go into port. You can also stay on the ship. Or if you go to port, you can come back anytime before the ship leaves. They tell you that day you need to be on the ship by 4:45. Not a second later, you must be on board by 4:45. So plan to be here by 4:30 or whatever. You don't want to miss the ship. We're not going to sit around and wait for you. Now, if you've never done a cruise, you might not know this, but obviously if you're in port and it's lunchtime, you're going to go get lunch, you have to pay for your lunch if you're in port. However, if you're on the ship, while you're in port, the ship's stores are closed because of like tax purposes, but the restaurants are open. So you kind of have to figure you're paying for lunch even if you're not on the ship. Now, again, do with that information what you will. Does that mean you need to come back before lunch every day? Of course not. But you may want to at least consider that in the back of your mind if you're traveling with like 6 kids and 2 adults and you're paying for meals for them. The meal's already paid for on the ship. So that's one more thing to consider in terms of, do I want to get off the ship at every port? How much time do I want to spend off the ship? So personally for me, I did consider both. I think going on a cruise where it's somewhere where you want to see it, but it's not super high on your list, is absolutely the perfect way to go, because then you do not have this feeling of, I'm wasting all this money by not being on the ship, in terms of, I paid to be on the ship, I'm paying for the meals in our room and everything, or I'm paying to go to see all these ports and I'm not getting off the ship. So for us, that really made the most sense, and that made it the most relaxing and most enjoyable trip ever. I hope you guys found this video helpful. I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye, guys.